Welcome back, everyone, to more from the Sable Eyes. Me today with Jordan. How are we doing, Jordan?
Not too bad, thank you.
That is good, and we're here for yet another matchup for the upcoming Cosmic Eclipse format. It is Malamar Giratina up against ReshiRom Zekrom, and I'll throw it out there for you, Jordan. This match is going to be a bit of a wild ride. You can't really... you can see it a little bit. The camera's a bit jittery for this one. Obviously, there was some sort of earthquake that was happening whilst this match was going on because... for whatever reason, the camera is stuttering all over the place, but it shouldn't impact it too much. But if you are a person who has a large aversion to seasickness, then maybe don't watch it. Just listen to the audio. But yeah, it's going to be an interesting one. We've got Scott Langford playing ReshiRom Zekrom on the left-hand side with that Naganadel engine with some support from things like Heatran GX, and on the right we have Adrian Hammer, who is playing Malamar Giratina with that new Baby Blacephalon. It's going to be exciting.
It sure is. ReshiRom Zekrom is definitely a deck that neither of us have really rated too highly. We haven't really been able to find a list for it that we are liking at the moment, but quite a few people played ReshiRom and Zekrom at this tournament. Scott, of course, being one of them who was really excited to try out this deck, and it was doing actually pretty well. I think a lot of us were pretty impressed with how the deck was performing overall. And if it can do pretty well against Malamar, then it's a pretty strong deck. So we'll have to wait and see how this match turns out.
Yeah, exactly. Now, it's probably a pretty solid and interesting matchup for ReshiRom. Obviously, the 270 damage cap isn't going to be a big deal, and the fact that you can get that energy back into play with Poipoles is really, really strong. So Scott seems to have a pretty solid start here. He's got a ReshiRom Zekrom with a Lightning Energy in the active. He's got one on the bench. He's just denayed into a Mysterious Treasure or two. He's actually got two of them, wow. So discards 2 energy there. He'll probably be grabbing a Poipole, and you'd imagine he'll go for... Well, he's actually playing a Mewtwo GX there as well. That's really interesting. I suspect this is in the list just because he is obviously thinking about decks like Gardevoir, which are potentially going to come up. It's really interesting that he's... Did he grab anything off of the second one there?
No, it looks like he just took the one Pokemon, which is weird. I would have at least taken an Aganadel. Unless... Okay, he's just playing...
He's going for the Titanizer. That makes a lot of sense, yeah. I was about to say, it's like, that seems really strange to have used that up, but yeah, no, this is quite a strong turn from Scott here. Setting up a couple of Poipoles, having himself a active that just needs 1 fire energy, and he's away, and I think we can actually look at that hand there. There's a Welder in there. There's a Pokemon Communication. There's a Pokemon. He's going to be able to set up and have himself an attack here, which is going to be really, really strong. It'll be interesting to see how Adrian sets up.
Yeah, it's certainly a pretty respectable start from Scott, and Adrian's starting off pretty well there with Mysterious Treasure Skyline Tina as well. It's a pretty good way to start, especially when you open Jirachi. About the Mewtwo tag team in Scott's list, I did speak to Scott a little bit about that card the night before, and he did say exactly what you said. It was there to have a Pokemon with a different weakness, which is pretty good. But yeah, the Mewtwo I imagine won't be coming up too much in this matchup. Scott has basically got himself exactly everything he needs to start taking prizes from turn 2, which is exactly what you wanted to be doing against this Malamar deck, and Adrian is drawing a bunch of cards off of a Lily, it looks like, and he's going to be trying to get himself in a decent position to start applying pressure to his Zekrom ReshiRom, so it looks like both decks are functioning exactly how the players want them to.
Yeah, they're doing exactly the right thing. That's actually interesting as well, because you would think in Scott's position that he'd be in a really strong spot if he could use End's Resolve in order to utilize that ReshiRom's GX attack and take potentially 2 knockouts on the bench. But I know for a fact that Scott isn't running End's Resolve, so that isn't going to be an option for him. He's going to have to just take knockouts like in the old-fashioned way, just by attacking one at a time. So might not be a big problem though, because ReshiRom has a large amount of HP, 270, and he's going to be able to pretty consistently get that damage off. You'll see here he's going to get a Ultra Space into play and find himself a Naganadel. That's 1 charging up, which is all he needs to take a knockout on this Jirachi, but he also has that Heatran in his hand. He could potentially use Pokemon Communication to put that into the deck and get another Naganadel if he so chose.
I feel like he only needs the 1 Naganadel at the moment, so not too much pressure to go for it now, although it wouldn't be the worst of the decks. He does have quite a few he has quite a few basic energy in the discard pile already. I think the Scott strategy in this matchup is probably going to be kind of similar to what Pikarom decks used to do against Malamar, where he's going to admit that he's got a bad price trade, but instead to beat Malamar, he's going to try and swap between a whole bunch of different attackers potentially. I know he plays cards like the Heat Train you just mentioned and Zero Aura GX to give himself a lot of cool pivot options to switch between attackers and maybe make it hard for Adrian to take some knockouts. But one of the new cards that every deck got, but specifically Malamar is able to use quite well, is that new Great Catcher. So Scott is going to have to keep that in mind when he's mapping out his prizes.
He certainly will, and talking about mapping out his prizes, one of the best things to do when you take prizes is to take a prize. Scott knocked out that Jirachi and hasn't taken the prize yet. I hope he realises.
I hope so too.
But yes, it's all well and good to say that you need to map your prizes out, but if you can't be bothered taking them, then it's not the end of the world.
One thing I've seen that happening quite a few times actually, because there's quite a few attacks, for example, with ADP's attack where you sturge your deck for energy, Breakzard's attack where you sturge your deck for cards. Like whenever you have an attack where you have to do something before you take your prizes, sometimes people forget to take their prizes, and ReshiRom not quite as big an offender for that, but Scott, while just choosing the Engie on the bench to discard, obviously got caught up a bit.
Yeah, it looks like he still hasn't gone to grab it, so hopefully he doesn't need to win this game by one prize. It would be really awkward.
Wait and see what happens. I'd like to think they'll hopefully pick it up at some point during this game, but until then, we'll go on and assume that prize card is taken, unless it comes off a little later. Adrian's setting up pretty well here. He's got himself,
there we go. Scott's taking the prize. He's realised.
Cool. I thought that was going to happen. Like most of the time, players pick it up within the turn if that ends up being caught. But yeah, Adrian is looking likely that he's going to be able to get a Shadow Impact off this turn if he can find a switch off of this Cynthia and Stellar Wish for 5. It's not going to be super easy, but it's not that unrealistic. And I think, did he see a switch straight away?
I'm not sure. I think there's an skateboard and a switch. I think he must have just played an acro bike. So there's the retreat. Actually got to make sure that you remember you need to have that second energy on the active before you promote it. That was close.
I've almost done that a few times as well.
I'm just so excited to get the Giratina into the active. I'm ready to go. Oh dear, but there's the attack. Bang! 130 damage into
got the animations
active.
Going on here.
Tell you what, it's all happening. And the choice now for Adrian where that 40 damage is going to go. That's not necessarily the biggest deal, but if you do put the 40 damage on the Giratina, then it is going to allow Scott to only discard 1 energy for a knockout. So it's a little bit of a choice. Looks like he's going to go for the Inkay on the bench, and then it's Scott's turn.
Yeah, I think that's a smart play from Adrian there. And also, the fact that he's got the spell tag on the Giratina is pretty impactful here, because it means Scott isn't able to just take out this Giratina for free with this ReshiRom and think he's going to be safe next turn. That spell tag is going to make it very easy for a second Giratina, or most likely the same Giratina, to come in and take a second hit to knock it out. So Scott's going to want to either find a way to get around that spell tag, or maybe go into a different attacker this turn if he can't heal at all, because he really doesn't want to be giving up a tag team this early in the game.
No, he really doesn't. So there's the ability used from the Ganadel. Scott rocking his TCG player little ability things that everyone promotes all the time, and attaching a fire energy to the bench to ReshiRom. And it looks like he's just going to go, that's fine. Not the best turn for Scott. And he's going to cop this 40 damage from the spell tag. He's definitely going to take one of those onto the active, and then the 3 could go pretty much anywhere else. The 10 damage on the ReshiRom on the bench is critical. Looks like there's going to be 2, 1 onto the Dene, and then 2 onto the Ganadel. I'm trying to make that maths a little bit easier for Adrian in the upcoming turns.
Yeah, I'm not too sure what the 20 damage on the Ganadel is going to be useful for. Oh, Scott almost beginning to take a prize there, I think.
He just took it again. That's alright.
But yeah, Adrian's only going to be requiring a single Malamar this turn in order to declare Shadow Impact, thanks to that Recycle Energy. He doesn't even need an energy in play. Sorry, in hand, even though he's got Viridian anyway. Yeah, he is going to need to find one more Malamar this turn to be able to take a knockout. And it's a little unfortunate for Scott, because I believe I see the Heatran was in his hand. If he was able to find like a switch or a way to go into Heatran, while it's still not great, I feel like that would have been a little bit of a better situation for him, rather than giving up this tag team. But we see a Cynthia coming out from Adrian here, and that means that he wasn't holding a Malamar. He has a chance to whip it here, and that would be huge.
There's 11 cards to look at. Hopefully we find a Malamar. It looks like there's a Pokemon Communication and a Pokemon there. The Jirachi going back into the deck in order to find that Malamar. So there's not going to be a whiffed attack. That means that we are going to see this ReshiRom knocked out. And there's also a Stellar Wish that Adrian is welcome to use as well. He hasn't used Viridian Forest, so he could use that as well. Malamar just doing Malamar things right now. He's got Acro Bike to play. This card's a Viridian, don't need that. And there's the Stellar Wish. So we'll see what he gets off of the top 5. Now it's all bonus cards, looking for probably a spell tag, and look at that. There it is, the middle card.
Yeah, that spell tag is actually a really big deal here, because I think what Adrian might be trying to set up here with that damage on the Ugandel and the Poipole is if he gets this spell tag to trigger next turn, and Scott going down to 3 prizes, he might be trying to pull off like a massive Blacephalon turn where he can maybe knock out the Ugandel and the Poipole at once. It certainly seems like he's targeting down those Pokemon with as much damage counts as he possibly can. I imagine that's where his spell tag is going to be focusing down as well. So really looks like Adrian's trying to take full advantage of that Blacephalon turn, which I don't think Scott has any chance of skipping if he's not playing that Enter Resolve.
Yeah, exactly, and it's one of those situations where if the damage had that 20 damage that's on the Poipole had gone on to actually the Dedenne, then he could potentially have taken 2 prizes, but instead, no, I'm going to get rid of both of those support Pokemon on the bench. That's where the real damage is going to come from. And if Scott...
Well, it's still 2 prizes, right?
Yeah, it's still 2 prizes, and it's going to cripple the board state a lot more, so I'd be happy to do that. Here's a Welder onto the active. I'm going to find some cards here. Nothing amazing, unfortunately. Scott kind of hunting himself a Zeraora, maybe, to get this Heatran into the active that he's holding in his hand. There is actually a switch in there, so if he can find another Naganadel or an attachment, he could potentially get that knockout with a Heatran. But no, instead he's just going to power up this Naganadel on the bench, use the ability, and we'll see how we go from there.
Well, he's got the Pokemon Communication in his hand, and I believe there's at least a Poipole in his hand as well, so I think it's pretty important for Scott to try and find that Naganadel this turn, just to make it a little harder for Adrian to pull off that double prize Blacephalon play, which it looks like he's setting up, or even just to protect the Poipole from dying from Spell Tag is also pretty good.
Yeah.
He's got the Viridian Forest that he can use still, so he can find himself a Lightning Energy if he just wants to settle for the attack with ReshiRom, because I don't think he can get the Naganadel and... oh no, because he can still attach a Fire Energy, and then he's got the switch in hand, right? So he can attack with either Heatran or ReshiRom this time.
He can get the Naganadel into play and potentially power that up with a switch, moving the Heatran into the active. But the way that Scott's playing here makes me think that maybe one of those Naganadels is actually prized, because Scott's not a bad player. He'd be looking for that route, and you can see him. He's fiddling around with that switch, but obviously not happy with what is going on. And this is an interesting... He's promoting the Poipole here.
No, that is not the Pokemon I was expecting to come active there.
That is an interesting one. That suggests to me that Scott is aware that his Naganadels are not available to him in this game. That was a pass. Yeah, that's a really, really awkward turn. And the worst bit is if he had just used the Naganadel to put a Fire Energy on instead of a Lightning one, then he would have actually been able to attack that turn. But oh well, you live and you learn.
Well, it's also possible that maybe Scott was consciously choosing not to take a prize there. Maybe he's really scared of going into this Blacephalon turn. He wants to make sure he's got a bit of a better board to deal with it. I don't think that's a very good route of play, but maybe that's the line of play that Scott's looking at.
Potentially, and all it's really going to do here is give Adrian another turn to find Blacephalon. He's got himself another Malamar in play now. There's an energy attachment onto the Giratina, a Psychic Recharge. There's going to be plenty of stuff going on here, and another Spell Tag onto that Malamar. And this damage is going to add up very quickly. There's the attack being declared. And another 40 onto the bench to Giratina to keep that Giratina in the active on 130 HP.
And now it's going to be really awkward for Scott, because Adrian's down to 2 prizes now, and that Dedenne on the bench. If Scott triggers the spell tag, it'll take 40 more damage, and then the Blacephalon can just knock out the Dedenne on the bench to end the game. So if Scott was planning to play around the Blacephalon turn, then he'd better find a way to do it right now, otherwise he's going to be in a bit of trouble. He's also still on 4 prize cards because he did with the knockout last turn. This Naganadel would have been able to do 160, which would have been pretty strong this turn to use a non-GX to take a knockout. But the fact that he didn't take a prize last turn is going to have that missed opportunity to take a big one-hit KO with a non-GX and forced to go into the Heatran instead.
Yeah, so the Heatran coming into the active, that's going to be able to deal with this Giratina, but the spell tag damage onto that Dedenne is going to put Scott in a bad position if Adrian is able to find that Blacephalon. You can see lots of card shuffling going on here. We've got two players who are obviously quite nervous about the upcoming turn, because I think both of them are aware that this is it.
In fact, I think I saw it Espeon Deoxys in Adrian's hand, so he doesn't even need the Blacephalon if this spell tag triggers. He can just use the GX tag from SPDO, put 100 damage plus 40 from the spell tag onto that Dedenne. And that's also going to be the perfect maths for Adrian to win this first game. So I'd say Scott's going to need to find a reset stamp to have a chance of winning this game, and I don't think he's even playing any in his list at the moment.
No, he'd need to commit another Dedenne to the board. It looks like, yep, no, I'm not happy to do that. I'm just going to put do the damage, take the knockout, and you can see Adrian very quickly putting 40 damage on the Dedenne, going for the Ultra Space just to have a look-see. Maybe he's looking to see if that Blacephalon is in there. It is. He's going to grab that out, and now that Scott is on 3 prizes, he's going to be able to do 120 damage. You can see Scott there obviously realizing that his fate is sealed, and that Blacephalon is going to be doing the job, doing 120 damage on Scott's board and knocking out that Dedenne for the last 2 prizes.
And yeah, as we said, Adrian already had a couple of cards to win the game with. I'm surprised Adrian's still playing cards down at this point. I'm pretty sure he's still on 2 prizes because he knocked out a tag team and a poi pole. There it is. He is taking the game.
Yep.
Just playing a couple extra cards.
Just checking it out. And yeah, there was Scott's Naganadels were in the prizes. So yeah, there we go.
Yep, it all makes sense now.
It does.
We knew that Scott probably had more information about what was going on than we did. We gave him the benefit of the doubt, and
we were right.
Right.
Yeah, not only were the 2 Naganadels prized, but it was also the Tapu Koko, and the best bit...
That's really rough.
And all 3 of them remained prized. That's the worst bit. So not only was it the 50-50 of the prizes being all of those good energy accelerating cards, it was also that Scott couldn't get into them at all. So an interesting game. By all accounts, Malamar won that one quite easily. It'll be interesting to see if Scott can manage to come back here and win game 2, because ReshiRom Zekrom, I almost said Pikachu Zekrom for a second there. ReshiRom Zekrom is a very strong card, and it's going to easily be able to account for these Malamars if Adrian misses spell tags or extra damage counters on his turn. Then Scott might potentially find himself in a pretty strong position.
And we actually saw Scott had a pretty decent start in the last game as well. Obviously, the fact that he missed those important prize cards off the first few knockouts was stopping him from keeping up his pressure in the mid to late game. But if Scott can have a pretty decent start like he did last game, and then hopefully not prize those Nagandels again, then I reckon he'll be in a pretty decent spot. Because as we said, if he just took that one knockout with Heatran, all of a sudden his Nagandel would have been doing double damage, and he'd be able to start evening the prize trade by using an on-GX. So we'll see if Scott can implement some of those strategies in this game. Looks like he's got a pretty decent hand in turn 1, but I'm not sure how good Poi Pole is as an opener in this matchup.
Yeah, Poi Pole is not super strong. I guess the best part for Scott is that at least it only has a 1 retreat. Mysterious Treasure discarding a Poker Gear here to search out a ReshiRom Zekrom onto the bench. Perhaps Scott can just attach to the benched ReshiRom and try and find a switch later on. Adrian on the right-hand side, opening with Mew, which is not really going to come up too much in this matchup. And here's a welded double energy from Scott. There you go. That's a big one. He actually has a switch and a lightning energy. So if that Mew wasn't in play, Scott could declare the GX attack actually in one more turn to take a prize on the bench. It's very interesting. But no, just attaches the lightning to the Poi Pole. Knows the Mew is in play. It's not going to be a big deal. And, wow, that's a really slow turn from Adrian. That's just a attachment and an attack with Mew, 20 on the active, 10 on the bench. That's not strong at all.
Yeah, that is definitely not what you want to see when you're playing Malamar, especially when you're versing a deck like ReshiRom that's going to start taking knockouts from turn 2 onwards, and that's exactly what Scott's going to be doing here. He's applying a medium pressure with this ReshiRom Zekrom, and also going to be setting himself up a bit with this Bulk Drop. I wonder what he's going to be choosing to go for here. Looks like just an energy switch.
There's an energy switch and a lightning energy. Maybe setting himself up for the GX attack next turn, knowing that Adrian doesn't have anything really to do.
I hope that he doesn't attempt to use it this turn, forgetting about Mew being in play.
No.
Oh, no. Scott, no!
Scott, no. You can see Adrian just pointed it out straight away.
Well, that was a little awkward. He's going to give Adrian one more time to set up, but To be fair, he's still not going to be in great position because he doesn't have a supporter or anything. Oh wait, I think he top decked to Cynthia.
He did. He top decked to Cynthia. So Malamar's back in the game, and just think Scott could have been a prize up here. All he had to do was declare the attack on the Mew, and he could have he could have GX attacked next turn. That's okay.
He also wasted his, not only his GX attack, he wasted his supporter there, which I feel like there are a lot of other cards he would have liked to have rather gotten an Angie switch, knowing now that he can't use his GX attack.
Yeah, just,
I guess when you're playing against Malamar, you're not used to your opponent benching the Mew, or especially having opened the Mew with a terrible start like that. Scott was like, "Oh, 1 Inkay. That's too good to pass up." But you gotta remember there's a.
Sorry, I just saw Adrian's Mega Low Punny proxy there. That was quite amusing. It's just a couple of stick figures on a piece of paper. That was really funny to look at.
I thought that on the day. It's like a little circle balloon figure, the Jigglypuff, and a stick figure is the Low Punny.
That's adorable.
It's probably the best proxy that was being played on the day.
Yeah, on the day that probably was the best one. And Adrian here thanking his lucky stars that he's not only got another turn, but he could potentially save his Mew here. Oh, and that's rude. Gets the spell tag onto the Mew. Just like, oh, well, maybe you'll decide to knock it out next turn. Just make this Mew do another 40 damage. And he chooses, I'm going to put all 3 of them on the Poipole, and I think Scott might have been a little bit too aggressive in overcommitting to that GX play, because this is not looking great. There's a Tate and Liza in his hand. You can see him. He's considering that attachment to the bench, and then he's just going to shuffle the hand away. Hopefully he gets something here, because if he just takes the knockout, and there goes the Poipole, and he's going to be left with pretty much nothing to do.
Yeah, he's definitely going to be looking for Nagano. He has the most important card that he needs to find. He'll also get himself extra energy on board once he starts trying to knock out those Girautinas. We see the treasure there, so he's not going to be having a terrible turn, but yeah, you got to think if he'd just declared a normal attack last turn to knock out the Mew, he'd be in a pretty dominant position here, but it looks like he's really given Adrian a chance to get back into the game. However, I assume he's probably going to knock out the Mew this turn. Like, I don't think he's going to somehow whip that knockout twice in a row.
Well, he'd have to accidentally pass, wouldn't he? That would have to be his route of play.
So I don't think that's going to happen. If we look at Adrian's board, he's got no Angie on the bench, he's got no Jirachi. He's probably going to have to promote his Inkay for the turn, so it looks like Adrian's board's going to be quite a bit awkward for the upcoming turn, and I don't see him getting a Shadow Impact unless he gets a busted hand.
So Scott here, mysterious treasuring, getting himself a Poipole, and then using Pokemon Communication to put that back in the deck to grab himself a Dene. Not happy with the cards that he got off of that Tate and Liza, so he's going to draw a fresh 6 off of this Dene, give himself a chance to find a few more pieces to the puzzle. And nope, nothing there. He's got a Cherish Ball that he could use to search out a GX and then calm it away, I guess. Or realistically, he could probably just attack, but that means he's going to lose his Poipole here, which is not super strong. You have to wonder what the best route of play for him here is.
You got to think that was a bit of a risky play from Scott, not going for the Naganadel and just settling for the Dene. I guess he was looking at his hand thinking, well, I don't really have any draw supporters in my hand right now, so if I don't get the Dene now, I might be having a dead hand. But yeah, he's lost his Poipole because of that, which isn't too big a deal, but he is going to struggle to get energy on the bench because he invested quite a lot of energy onto this active ReshiRom, and
has he ever? Has he ever? The best thing about that will be that when he gets the next ReshiRom out, he'll at least be able to discard them off of this one. So that's a positive.
Yeah, if this survives that long, and I have a feeling it will, because as we said, it's going to be pretty awkward for Adrian to pull off a relevant attack this turn. Like the most cost-efficient attack he could probably use this turn would be like using his Blacephalon to drop 4 damage counters on the board, which isn't going to be too relevant. So I'm guessing that Adrian's just going to be sacrificing this Giratina, getting advantage of that little bit of extra spell tag and distortion door damage while he sets up his board a bit more. And he's in a position where he can afford to lose a turn, lose a prize card, because he is playing a non-GX deck. But yeah, Scott has already taken 1 prize card, so he's going to be having a second one now. Could have been a third, but hey, we won't talk about that too much.
Yeah, no, so Scott has a treasure in his hand there. He just must have top-decked that Poipole. Makes you wonder why he didn't go for a Poipole last turn, knowing that his other one was going to be knocked out. Mysterious Treasure, discarding an energy, grabbing himself a Poipole, and then using Cherish Ball to get a Heatran GX, which, assuming that there's a switch and a fire energy in his hand, will be able to attack this turn. Make some use out of that energy on the active. The Poipole comes down, and now we're playing Poker Gear, looking for a supporter. We'll see what we can find.
I do think that Scott didn't have the Poipole or the Treasure in his hand last turn, so I'm guessing those were his prize card and his top decks, because I'm pretty sure he would have gone for that in the
Yeah,
Gandalf.
you would have thought so.
But yeah, he's really just going to have to try and get energy onto the bench this turn, and both those Poipoles going down this turn's not going to make it possible. He's going for the Heat Train instead, which is a really good play. Make some use of those excess energy that went onto that ReshiRom. We actually see the Tate and Liza for the switch effect, which is the reason why you play the card instead of Cynthia, but you still don't see that too often, so that's a pretty cool use of Tate and Liza there.
It certainly is, and it gives Heatran an opportunity to take a knockout where Scott might not have been able to take one before. That 40 damage coming down from the spell tag onto the 2 Poipoles on the bench, and Scott on 4 prizes. Now, Adrian has a pretty strong board, but is missing that retreat option. So hopefully he can find that this turn. He's going to discard a Psychic Energy with a Mysterious Treasure, and we'll go looking for, looks like another Inkay here. I don't know what the last card in hand is. Inkay may not...
There's definitely a draw supporter in his hand, I think.
Yeah, so
he's going to be able to dig for a switch effect. He's got a Lily, he's holding a Malamar as well, so he's got a whole bunch of Psychic utility Malamars in play and stuff, but we haven't seen Jirachi at all in this game, I don't believe, and that's going to be the main thing that's kind of been holding back Adrian's setup as well as you'd usually like to see from Malamar. And we see here he hasn't drawn the switch yet. He's going to be relying off this Acro Black. He finds the awesome Megalopunny.
It's the Megalopunny. But yeah, no
he
switch.
found the Jirachi that we were talking about, but once again, we've got to switch to actually take advantage of Jirachi. It's not going to be too useful a card here, so neither of those cards are going to actually help him out in this scenario. We'll see which one he values to hold in his hand for next turn, or maybe he just wants to have the Jirachi bet on his bench for consistency purposes for the following turn. Looks like that's what he's going to be prioritizing, although the Megalopunny would have been pretty decent here if he was able to actually power that up. He could have potentially taken a big knockout in this E-Train.
He could have, but I think at the moment Adrian's happy to sit. He's got that spell tag. He can just put it on the Inkay. Sure, I'm going to get knocked out, but I'm probably going to take one of your Poipoles with me. The issue for Adrian is that he hasn't been attacking. I don't think he's declared Shadow Impact at all in this game, and it's pretty weak. Scott, on the other hand, managed to find 2 Naganadels this turn, so he's going to be able to start charging up some of that energy, preparing himself to utilize that ReshiRom in the future. And in the meantime, he's got the Heatran sitting there. He can just keep attacking until eventually Adrian has to do something about it. So Scott in a much better position in this second game, but still obviously going into that awkward Blacephalon turn. And with this spell tag damage, Adrian potentially could get a big Blacephalon off here. We'll see 40 damage potentially coming down onto a few of those cards. We see it going onto the Dedenne here. So 20 onto the Dedenne to send it to 40, and then 20 onto the Naganadel with 2 energy. So that Naganadel is set up. The Dedenne is set up. There's options aplenty if there is a retreat option for Adrian.
Yeah, so Scott has been setting himself up pretty well in this game. It was really important for him to get that double Naganadel this turn, otherwise he would have been able to get crippled by that baby Blacephalon play this turn. Thanks to those Naganadels being in play, he can definitely knock out at least one of them pretty easily and set up a whole bunch of damage counters on the board in other relevant places, but it's going to stop Adrian from having too big of an impact on this game with the Blacephalon this turn, which is exactly what Scott wanted to see. And yeah, the fact that Adrian's only knockout in this game so far has been with spell tags on a Poipole, he's going to have to come back quite a bit. That Shrine of Punishment is definitely going to help. It's going to whittle down that Dedenne to potentially be knocked out later on in the game with an Espeon Deoxys GX attack maybe to finish off the game. But he's still going to have to find 3 prize cards, so he's going to have to knock out either this Heatran and one of the Naganadels, or the ReshiRom and Zekrom. And that's a lot of things that he has to do in just 3 turns before theoretically Scott wins the game with 3 back-to-back knockouts.
It is. There's the Blacephalon. There's 2 energy on it, and the way that Adrian is playing suggests there is a retreat option. There it is. The Blacephalon comes into the active. No spell tag this time, and the 120 damage targeting down that Dedenne, putting 110 and then 10 on the active, opting not to take that prize card there. No, yep, they're replacing it here.
He
Going,
gets the Shrine of Punishment, which is why I only put 110
yes.
on there.
Of course.
So, yeah,
I forgot
still
the Shrine
valuing
was
that
in play.
knockout. He's tying up the prize cards here, but this is actually a pretty important turn for Scott as well, because while being on 3 prizes is bad for the fact that Blacephalon gets its extra damage output, it's also the turn that Naganadel gets its extra damage output as well. Blacephalon is actually weak to Dark and not Psychic, so he wouldn't have been able to knock out Blacephalon with Naganadel if he didn't have that 3 prize turn activated right now. So this could be a really good turn for Scott to potentially force a Naganadel knockout, and then maybe go into his ReshiRom and Zekrom instead of his Heatran, which is going to be a lot easier to knock out. And that'll force Adrian to potentially have to take 4 more prize cards to win the game if he goes Naganadel into ReshiRom. And that's pretty much all he's going to need to win the game. He can take a prize with Naganadel this turn, or Heatran if he chooses to, but I feel like the Naganadel is going to be the better bet for him. And then he just needs to take 2 knockouts with that ReshiRom, and he'll be the winner of this game. So this is definitely exactly what Scott wants to see happening. It's going to be on Adrian to respond to those plays and see if he can pull off anything. I still haven't seen what's in Scott's hand, though, so I'm not sure if he's going to be opting to go for the Naganadel attack, or if he's happy to just settle for attacking Heatran. That Shrine of Punishment, though, is definitely going to whittle it down and make it really easy to knock out later on.
Yeah, the hand for Scott is not super strong here. There's a ton of energy in play, but not really anything to do with it. We did see Scott use the Vulcan before, perhaps looking for a switch, but didn't see one, so looks like Scott's just going to take the knockout. That Shrine damage ticking over, so we could potentially see this game swinging back into Adrian's favour. There's SBDO in the hand there. There's damage counters ticking over. There's 30 on the ReshiRom, an indiscriminate amount on the Heatran that I can't see. I don't know, but I presume
the glare there is pretty bad.
I presume it's
the damage on that Heatran is very relevant. We know he put at least a little bit of damage on it from the Blacephalon, and of course the Shrine of Punishment's been in play for about 2 turns. So if it's enough to be knocked out by a Shadow Impact here, I think that Adrian's going to be able to close out the game by attacking with Shadow Impact on this Heatran, and then going into Espeon Deoxys next turn. Take out one of those damaged Naganadels on the bench. Of course, he might not have the Espeon Deoxys in his hand next turn if Scott plays a Recess Stand, but as far as I know, that's not a card that Scott's running, so really looks like Scott might be getting punished here for not retreating into Naganadel.
Yeah, it might be the case that Scott's in a little bit of trouble. I don't know what's going on. The camera's going even more crazy than it was before.
There was a second distortion door there to chuck a couple more damage counters on the bench, and I assume he's just going to be retreating into Giratina and attacking since his bench is full. He doesn't really have any other options. This is the big moment of truth. Does Shadow Impact take out the Heatran? And it looks like I think it's
going to do its 170, so there's obviously a one little tick over with Shrine. 170 is the number, so Scott can potentially survive a turn here, but if he takes the knockout and the SBDO stays in Adrian's hand, then he is going to be able to take 3 prizes potentially next turn, get a couple of Shrine ticks going, use SBDO to knock out the Naganadel on the bench, and then use that extra little Shrine damage to take the knockout on the Heatran. Scott needs to find a stadium here, and he does, so he's going to be able to replace that Shrine, keeps his Heatran a little bit safer, and now we'll see if he's able to find that reset stamp. He's going to attach to the ReshiRom on the bench, and then you have to think that the retreat is on here. He'd have to retreat. There it is, the retreat, discarding 3 fire energies. Move that Heatran out of the active, and give yourself a chance at least to stop your your deck being decimated by an SBDO later on. I don't
think it's going to matter though, because I'm pretty sure Adrian has 3 prizes right now, and there's 60 damage on that Naganadel on the bench, so that's only going to be taking 70 damage from Espeon Deoxys, and then just 20
that's true,
damage.
Actually, yeah. So nothing that Scott realistically could have done. So it looks like SBD will be coming in clutch here to win the game for Adrian. That damage count, that damage counting up, was what I was trying to say, over the last couple of turns, and now it's just a matter of, does Adrian see the win con? He's looking at it. He's doing the maths.
Does he have the Espeon Deoxys in hand? I thought I saw it earlier, but it's possible he doesn't have it anymore.
I think he does. I think he's just about to play it. There it is.
There it is. Cool.
So the SBDO is in play, the energy is attached, and now it's just a matter of retreating declaring the GX attack and putting all of the damage counters in the right place. I think they're discussing it now. Yep, we can just go bang bang, knockout, 3 prizes. I think both players just trying to figure out there whether the numbers were right.
Scott was down to 1 prize card there, right? So you got to think if he'd just made that simple play where he didn't waste the GX attack and took a knockout in that Mew, he might have been able to get there. But that little error ended up costing him in the end. Adrian was able to take advantage of it, managed to get Cynthia off the top, and was able to play his way into victory. So a bit of a hiccup from Scott there. It happens every now and again. But
yeah, it does. And
especially, at least a close game.
Especially when you're playing brand new cards. Like, ReshiRom has only been out for like a day at this point when we're playing, and lots of people haven't been testing it as hard as we have, Jordan, so it's definitely acceptable to make a couple of mistakes early. But it is important to remember that Mew stops damage and not damage placement, so that ReshiRom's attack doing 100 or doing 200 damage to the bench or 170 to the bench or whatever it is.
Yeah, it's 170.
Is very relevant, the fact that it says that it's doing damage and not placing damage counters.
So yeah, it's going to be important to keep that in mind. But yeah, it's a rough matchup for Scott regardless.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Even though Adrian was had a bit of a slower start there, and Scott, if he'd been able to declare the right attacks, they might have been able to get it. But you got to go into this matchup thinking it's going to be tough. Sure, you've got a couple of plays you can make, but you really do just have to hope your opponent's going to have a slow start for you to have a chance at winning the game.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I'll wrap it up because I think we're about to run out of audio. Thanks, Jordan, for coming along.
Not a problem.
Thanks, everyone, for watching. Subscribe by clicking the sable eye in the middle of the screen. On the left are some videos YouTube thinks you'll like, and on the right we have our playlist for Cosmic Eclipse. Follow us both on Twitter and Facebook whilst you read Scott's messages, and we'll see you all next time for more from the Sable Eyes. Bye.